experience. It's going to be an interesting session. I know that. So what I would do, I mean, you can just tell us about yourself. Then after that, I'll just generally have a small little 1 minute on the symposium.
Yes.
And then, of course, then we can take it from there. Please.
Yes. Okay.
So you want to tell us about yourself first?
Yes, I will. My name's Helen Bishop, and of course, I live in the Northern Territory in a little place called Rumjungle, which is 119 kilometres outside of Darwin. My work in dispute resolution and peace building is mainly with First Nations people, and my experience is long, but I'm always still learning. I'm interested in the restorative approaches that peace building and dispute resolution can bring. And I've been a fierce advocate of that because in the Northern Territory, our prison population of Aboriginal men and youth is absolutely extraordinary. So children are not born criminals. So I have that attitude that opportunities need to be created to build more on peace building and problem solving through dispute resolution practices. Yeah.
But about the symposium, I mean, did you watch the inaugural address? Of course, it was too late in the night for you.
Well, I didn't watch it because I've been having very long hours getting my PhD finalised so I can submit it. And that has been like, I've been doing this for the last week and a half, and sleepless nights are something I need to prevent. I've got to sleep more.
Definitely, for sure. So, I mean, did you, of course, look, the idea of the symposium, definitely Indigenous peoples and mediation, because I feel that's an area where I would think maybe in a purer form of mediation, which over time with colonization, dispute resolution went into a certain direction. And of course, with the decolonization, also the dispute resolution and specifically mediation, for me, went into a different, totally very technical, very different direction. So I said, let's look at the purer form, learn from that. Then in September, there is a symposium on colonization, decolonization, and mediation. So then we'll see what were the effects of what happened on Indigenous peoples and their dispute resolution. And specifically for me, its focus is mediation. So 9th to 31st August. And of course, trying to get people from all over the world to give their experience. So we have people from all over. So that's what the symposium is all about. I don't know what your thoughts on the symposium are. So if you want to, after you were told about the symposium, what do you think? I mean, the idea behind it. And
well, I think it's important that that there is an opportunity to hear each other's points of view about the very different practices and processes we're bringing into peace building. I do know that Indigenous mechanisms for the traditional practices, that is, have been corrupted by either a number of different factors. Colonisation preventing the use of ceremonies and practices that inhibited conflict and that grew relationships and strengthened relationships, because that's mainly what those ceremonies were about. And in some cases, they're about punishments of various kinds with moderation, a bit of compassion, and sometimes some fairly injurious types of methods. But in the main, they were concerned with, in a traditional sense, supporting the greater health of the tribe or the language group, because everybody needed everybody to function so that they could survive. So me just saying that, I'm wondering what other people's experiences are, particularly in relation to other Indigenous nations who've experience colonisation. Mm.
But I think what we'll do is that we'll just look at what, I mean, with your study and everything, and people who I mean, within your community, of course, you can tell us about the community also. So what they have told you, what is the knowledge base that has continued? Because, like I said, on the colonization part of it, I wanted to keep that separately only because I didn't want the conversation to go totally into that. Of course, we will touch upon it. Definitely, I'm sure it'll come up. But I thought maybe let's keep it positive things about mediation in Indigenous peoples, because I don't want that whole negative thing that happened post, I mean, through colonization. So that was the idea of dividing the two, because I know there is an overlap. Definitely, there's an overlap. But
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, I respect that, and but two can't. I don't think either can occur without the other. However, in saying that, there are some wonderful positive things that happen out in communities where they're attempting to use mediation skills and processes to alter some of the more negative outcomes in communities. However, the downside is you need to have a support mechanism. You need to have the resources and the training to have, to grow and nurture the confidence in doing those types of complex human service works, because it is a complex job, because you're dealing with people who may have disabilities, trauma, gender, violence issues. They might have a whole range of different issues, and the mediator, our mediators, our Indigenous mediators, need to be properly skilled. And I'm not saying they're not properly skilled. I'm saying properly skilled so that they feel comfortable and they feel confident to do that work, not just left hanging out on a limb, which is some of the work that I've been attempting to achieve in the work that I do when I do it.
But a little bit about your community. I mean, is that pronunciation Kungarakan?
Kungarakan? Yes, Kungarakan.
Do you want to tell us a bit about the community?
There's not much to tell. I've been doing my PhD, so I keep to myself a lot because there's a lot of reading to do. But the Kungarakan people live in a wonderful country, a wonderful place in the Northern Territory that would, if you could look it up on Google and find Litchfield National Park, and that's the heartland of Kungarakan country. And it's quite a vast area of land, rich, has a lot of beautiful waterways. We've got beautiful people on a good day, and we've got bad people on a bad day. Just like everybody else. We've got good and bad days. We try our best.
But if within the community, the discussion on mediation, specifically as to what is the situation right now and what has been passed down over years and what they have been told about what it was. So you want to talk about that?
Well, I don't work that way. I don't work in my own community as a mediator for them or with them. I try to be helpful for them, but I work in other communities, delivering training, supporting their skills and their creative thinking about how they can work with people on difficult problem solving skills ways, like how do we get our people thinking about what works and what doesn't work. Who do we need? Who are the right people to come into a mediation? What's the one story they're going to walk away with? So giving them training in those areas and supporting them in the best way that their group can manage. And it might mean that we're translating all the models for mediation into their own language so that that learning is much more meaningful for them. It might be about working with them to design or to have an understanding of how their skin group systems work to help them select the best mediators, who would be the right mediators for someone or a group, because we have kinship systems here that inhibit our communication with each other, or, you know, it prevents wrong way relationships. So maybe it's quite complex, but it's a really cool rule because it also limits conflict.
But you have to take us more into that, Helen. You have to elaborate on that. You have to, well, look, these are things that you're seeing around you, but in various parts of the world, they would not even know that what kind of structure exists. And like I said, what was the situation as maybe you were told, and then how did that change? What has happened with generally modernization, and of course, I mean, communities being influenced by a certain culture which comes from outside. So do we have some kind of a historical background there?
Well, I can give you some examples, but it would mean talking about colonization.
Beyond colonization.
No, there's nothing beyond that, because if you remember, Indigenous peoples of Australia have an oral history, and that's how our archives are stored, in our oral histories or our oral traditions. There are some ceremonies that are used, but and they're mostly in Mawal-rom, the Yolngu people use from Ramangini have got a really beautiful system. And they're sort of bringing life into it by investing in learning about that ceremony, training, talking about it, encouraging people to become the leaders in that, leading mediators in that. They don't call themselves mediators. It's another word in their language. But similar to Tiwi Island people, they've got their own system and their own skin group system, and they manage their disputes in their particular ways. So each different language group is going to be reliant on their own social system to help them determine how they run a peace-building, mediating, dispute resolution or training practice run. You know, that determines who can go. It's not about gender inequality, it's about kinship and who you're not allowed to be near because it's wrong way relationship. And if you breach those wrong ways, you're starting conflict. So that's the last thing I want to be doing. We've got to make sure that the right people are present, the right mix of people are present.
But in terms of the structure as such within the community, I mean, how is it? I mean, you have some kind of community leaders, and how do those community leaders come out? And I mean, something about the structure as such.
I honestly, I can't comment on that because we've got 240 to 280 different language groups in Australia. Many of those languages have finished, but all those different lots of people have different lots of rules and kinship structures, and I couldn't speak to I've just spoken to two, Yolno and Tiwi. I don't know all the other ones, all because there are so many. So I'm just saying it's being mindful as an Australian mediator who's Aboriginal, that I realise that we've got systems and that other people haven't got the exact same systems, skin group systems or kinship systems. They'll have a different one with different names, probably doing all the same things, but I don't know them. So when I go into a community to do work with them, I ask, who are the right people? Who can I bring together? What are your skin group systems? What are their name? What are the name of them? So I get familiar. You know, it's not like buying a new car where things are pretty obvious. You've got to ask questions of the people and get to know what it is the people want of you as a trainer or a mediator, and their expectations, I imagine, for what you're going to deliver.
But what, I mean, in terms of the process, do you want to take us through an example of a process, and then we'll see how is it different from what people are used to in terms of mediation? Is there some things that you want to share there?
I'm just thinking, there are processes. I can give you an example. When I first went and did some work in Tiwi Island, my first point of call in my conscience was to call on and introduce myself to the ladies in the community, to let them know, you know, I've come here, this is what I do. At the time, I worked for a place called NAJA, which was the North Australian Aboriginal Justice Agency. And I'd go in there twice a week. I'd fly over to Tiwi Islands. I'd see them twice a week, and I would get to know them. I would ask them questions. I'd ask them, would they introduce me to the men who would be suitable to talk to? And they told me, no, you've got to wait a little while. You know, they're checking out me, making sure I'm a decent, lawful woman. And so I just continued to work with that community for a while, with the ladies, and get to know the ladies and get to be introduced to their children and their adult children, so that they could foster in me a relationship with them, and vice versa. They could. I was trying to demonstrate that I was a trustworthy woman, a lawful woman, and that we could speak, and if they so wanted, they could come with me when I went and spoke with the men about mediation as well. It took 6 months doing that same thing. They see many people fly in and out of their communities, and they don't do a good, sound and enriched job. I did not want to hinder that. I didn't want to put in the way my own eagerness to start something. I really wanted, I needed for them to be able to trust me, so that if they said, you can go to those men and you can go and talk to them, they knew that that's exactly what I would do. I would do nothing more and nothing less. I would do what I was saying I was going to do, and then I'd come back and let them know. And it seemed healthy enough. It seemed prosperous, our relationships. And I did this over a period of 2 years, and then I stopped doing that job. I moved away, and then when I came back, they went, oh, good, Helen's back, come and do some training with us. So I'd already created my trust and relationship with that community. They knew who I was, and sadly, many of the women and the men that I worked with have passed away. And, well, they're not all passed away, but those who I started out with, a number of them just aren't there, and they were such wonderful, beaming, happy and helpful mediators for Tiwi Island. But
this was,
I try to work that same way with all of the communities I'm given an opportunity to work with.
But this was when? I mean, the first time that you went there, which year was that?
2009.
But this was basically to do, I mean, to make them mediators as such, or train them, or was it for a particular dispute?
No, not to make them mediators. To build a mediation service, I needed to make sure that they understood that I was there with good intentions, but I didn't want to build something I wanted. I wanted them to build something that they realised they needed.
But there wasn't a dispute that you were going there to resolve. You were going to develop a culture of mediation kind of thing.
Yeah, well, they did have a mediation. They did have a mediation ceremony, and that's what I was exploring with them. That's what I was there for, to research that, but found that they didn't have that. They had this Western model thing that they'd created themselves. I've got to give them credit for that. It was called No Stick, No Stone. And that they had their own method there. And then I was interested in finding out about how they got their training. Could we elaborate on the training? Could we be supporting them more by bringing in their old ceremonies? Would that be useful? Could they do things in language? Would they need a language, a procedural book written in language? So I was examining all of those things, but I couldn't do all of that at once. It was like growing a plant. I had to water the plant in order to get the fruit from the product from the plant. And I needed to nurture their understanding, and they needed to nurture mine. And that's that sort of kernel of working together in a collaborative way to understand one another in order to move beyond not just understanding, but developing something and planting another seed to grow something. Because No Stick, No Stone was a response to court orders for young people. And it was a good one. But there were no mediation services for adults or for any other things, any other conflict there. This was a response to young people having been to court or something having occurred through court or through the police. So anyway.
So basically, what we're looking at is a situation where obviously there's not so much of the traditional methods and that kind of an environment which exists that has already got replaced to a major extent. There's some aspects still there, which of course,
yes.
But in terms of, look, there was the symposium I told you last year, which I did on mediation in our culture and traditions. The idea was that that this is a process they're familiar with, and we just have to connect them with the process.
Yes.
Yeah. So that part of it,
that part worked for them. It wasn't to suggest that it worked for adults, because it wasn't applied to adults. It was a youth intervention program. It wasn't, I have a conflict, I need someone to help me solve this problem because I can't solve it myself. It wasn't that way. It wasn't driven to cause a ceremony to be done either. It wasn't driven to anybody going and supporting a group of people enter into a problem-solving endeavour.
But the ceremony that you're talking about, some part of it existed. What was that?
Oh, it's called Ponki, and it's used for funeral ceremonies. Ponki, the name of the mediator group is Ponki Mediators. And the Ponki Mediators name themselves because part of the ceremony of a funeral, their mortuary rites, is that when you have that ceremony, everything is finished. Nothing, when someone passes away, no anger, there's no recriminations, it's finished. So they call themselves Ponki Mediators. It's finished. Trying to support the idea of helping the community to resolve and finish conflict.
But in terms of disputes, I mean, did you see what kind of disputes they had in the community? I mean,
oh yes, and I entered as a mediator on a number of occasions, but yeah.
I mean, did you have some examples of disputes that came up in front of you? What did you see?
Oh, now that I've talked about the community, I don't want to actually talk about any of the disputes because I've named the community, and that would not be nice that would be rude of me to then talk about disputes from that community.
Not on a general basis. I mean, nothing that you want to.
Look, it's no different than anybody else's family or community. When disputes arise, that's what I could honestly say. Fairly typical of families in any dispute that they may have. I just don't want to isolate any particular disputes. Yeah.
But in terms of the community as such, I mean, you're seeing actually a community which existed. I mean, it wasn't that the community had broken up. That wasn't the situation.
Sorry, can you?
The community as such existed as a community. I mean, that had not broken up because of whatever changes have happened in that world, in the world in general.
No, you're right there. They hadn't broken up. Their whole social system changed, though. Their social dynamic changed. They were no longer practicing their ceremony. They still speak Tiwi very fluently. They learn at school in Tiwi, so that's a wonderful thing. That's on them. I think that's wonderful because that's going to help them shape their own mediation and peace building training, their own language, because they all in that language, they will have all the rules of those relationships in their language. So that's a wonderful thing. And that they still do ceremony. They just don't do their dispute resolution ceremony anymore. And you'll find that happens throughout Australia because during the years where children were stolen, you weren't allowed to do ceremony. You weren't allowed to speak your language. So it was it was pretty terrible. So those ceremonies were very powerful, though. Very powerful indeed.
Because I'm just thinking that in terms of the younger lot, are they still are part of the communities? Are they leaving this community and the structure of are the younger people still there? I mean, has that whole change of them moving out and going into other parts and the structure of the community that way is changing? Is there something happening there?
Oh yeah, there's things like that happening. But you know, one community is as different as the other. I'm just trying to think of a community where I can look. I think Yolngu communities are really strong on culture and language. They're very powerful in that respect, and their youth are. I mean, surely you've seen some music that comes out of Arnhem Land. The music that they put out, they've got very famous artists, Yotha Yindi, Gomerong, you know, you've got, what's his name, Baker Boy. They have health in their own creativity, because their culture is very strong, and that's very powerful for them. It enables them. So them building up their governance and their dispute resolution ceremony, the makarata, that's powerful.
Because I'm just thinking that on one end, I mean, we are talking about a victim offender, which mediation is one part of it. But I mean, I am looking at that not really as mediation. Is it more just to integrate them into the community? So it's a role of the mediator, but is there really a mediation as in a dispute being resolved? So I'm just trying to distinguish between the two.
Oh, yes, look, I'm just going to say there are a number of different frameworks under which mediation can work. Mediation can work as a court conferencing opportunity with youth justice. It can also work as a negotiation process for people who have committed a crime in the community, gone to jail, and want to return to that community, and there may be some serious resistance from the victim's family. So that negotiation strategy between the prisoner and the victim's family may result in negotiation with an outcome that can be quite fruitful for the victim's family as well as the offender. So conflict gets navigated even between these two opposing parties, as well as between youth court conferencing or victim offender mediation prior to sentencing. These sorts of frameworks are always requiring the need to manage conflict when you're sitting in the room trying to negotiate or trying to create a remorsefulness in the offender that isn't fully realised that they're not exhibiting for the victim. And that can be a challenge as well, because you don't want to tell them, don't you feel remorseful? These sorts of things need to occur naturally as possible. Maybe a little bit of a push, but...
Because actually what I did was, because obviously mediation, I mean, what people's understanding of mediation might be different. So what I did was, I said, let's look at the definition in the Singapore Convention, which of course the convention deals with international commercial mediation, but I said that's a different aspect. At least we have a place which is a UN convention where mediation has been defined. So I said, for the purpose of the symposium, we'll take this definition because we have to have some common ground as to what we are talking about. So basically a process, irrespective of the expression used, or the basis upon which the process is carried out, because definitely names will be different, can be different. The process, various parts of the world, some people consider evaluative part not being mediation, only facilitative is mediation. Everyone has their, but I said this definition at least puts it down that whatever way you practice it will not make a difference. It's still mediation. But main thing for me was the aspect of the dispute, whereby because parties are attempting to actually resolve a dispute. So that is why I was, because for me, I'll tell you, Helen, the idea has been, I've been focused and going for disputes. I call it the dispute resolution revolution. And the conflict part, of course, is much larger. But I said, let's focus on the dispute only because that part of it is kind of quantifiable. You can actually see it happening. So does this dispute got resolved?
Well, it's in front of you. It's in front of you. Yes.
Exactly. Main thing was that the person lacks the authority to impose a solution, because that part also you'll help us distinguish between that, because in communities sometimes we talk about mediation, but actually the person is in a position of authority and is actually imposing a solution. And of course, when we talk about mediation, sometimes we get these things that, okay, in this community mediation is practiced, and when you go in, you find out it's actually an arbitration. It's not a mediation. So that distinguishing also we need to do. So that, because one is the name is of course connecting the community to the right name, because that's why this distinguishing between mediation and arbitration is required, because some places you go out thinking this was the name given to you for mediation, but the people understand that as arbitration. So they can't, I mean, you're not connecting to the right process. So one, we need to connect them to the right process. So in terms of name of the process, what they understand or we have understand as mediation as part of the definition. So that is one thing that we need to definitely connect the community with.
Yes, yes, I agree. I do agree.
Yeah, and then the aspect of actually resolving a dispute, because I'm telling you that, look, the role of mediators in, of course, restorative justice, I mean, victim offender situation, or even peace building, again, much larger. Peace building, there will be a role of mediators in that, but it's a much larger activity. This conference I did in May and June, one session was on mediation versus peace building, because what happens is, you talk about mediation and the peace building that is sometimes referred to. And I feel that, okay, that's, like I said, it's a much larger activity. Lots goes into peace building. So because why I'm trying to focus on the mediation and mediators is because the role of mediators is, of course, it has to be clear. And the importance of it, the value of it should be looked at by itself, and bring them in the peace building process where required, rather than saying, okay, when you talk about mediation and you say peace building, because they're two different activities. I mean, for me, because like I said, my definition of mediation comes from there. So on that aspect of it, is there something that you want to take us through as to, yeah?
Yes, there is. I hear what you're saying, because I can go into a community and say, well, do you know what mediation is? I could say that. And, or do you like mediation? And they might go, nope, we don't. Oh, can you tell me about that? And they'll go, oh, the last mediator we had, blah, 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 and they'll tell you something. So I frame a lot of my discussions around peace building and what processes I might use in peace building, because I have to have a toolbox in peace building as well. But the other part of the peace building journey I go on with the communities is about education, and that's what you're talking about. Educating the parties about what it is that you will be doing, in which stage that you're doing it, as you travel down this path together. And whether it's peace building or dispute resolution, you're going to have a bundle of tools you need to have in that toolbox to be able to support all the parties, hear each other speaking, but also communicate with each other effectively to understand those points of view and arrive. Oh, at the station, saying, oh yeah, so if we help each other, if we sort of design things together, they've got to arrive there. We can't do that for them. They have to, the light goes on and they go, oh, we can do this. In other cases, it's a long education, and sometimes people don't arrive there. They don't actually get what that process is supporting them to do. Years later, they'll go, oh, yeah, I went to mediation, and this is what happened. But do you know what? Later on, I went to another mediation, and it was so much better than that first one I had. Must have been the mediator. I'm thinking, well, sometimes it's we don't know that we didn't know, and we don't know. So that education of the parties is just reassuring them, really, I'm not trying to make you do anything. I'm here to help both of you. I'm going to make you walk in each other's shoes, because I think that's the way you get to help you understand the other person's point of view, even though you might not want to. But it might help you get to talk about that problem, because I'm all about being hard on the problem and soft on the people.
Yeah. Because a little yeah. No, please. You were saying something.
Well, I mean, what more can I bring with me other than letting them know that I'm not going to be making them do anything other than listen to each other. I'll stop them talking over the top of each other, because I own that process, but they own everything else. They own the content, you know.
But tell me, Helen, are you going in with your hands tied in relation to how the process has to be? Like I said, I am just a facilitator. Mediation for me is just facilitative, and I will not go beyond that. Is that something like a hand-tied situation?
No, I like to have a yarn about things. I like to talk to people and go, oh, tell me a bit more about that. Sounds tough. So what did you do about it after that? Make it a conversation without threat. Because I think people think it needs to be all formal, and it really doesn't. So, you know, like it's just getting that conversational relaxedness about a really stressful issue. You know, recognising that it's tough for people, but also at the same time recognising it takes courage to sit in the same room with the other party who you've been in conflict with or in a dispute with, and to nail down what a problem might look like and how you might resolve it between you, and if it's doable and sustainable, and do you have the resources and the willpower and all of those things that go into the bundle of agreement making inside of the negotiation process. Yeah.
But Helen, I'll go, I mean, little digression, because we use the word parties. Interestingly, in the conference, like I said, in May and June, there was a session on terminology and mediation. So Jeannie, she works on community mediation in the US. Interesting thing she said, look, in our community mediation, we do not use words like parties, because thing is that mediation has come out of the court process and terminology has also come out from there. So we say participants. So that was interesting. So now I've also started using the word participant, because let us look at it differently.
I do. I use the word parties and participants with different people. It just depends.
Because I was
I don't have a rule about that, honestly. I've never given it much thought.
Yeah, no, interesting. I found that interesting. She said, look,
or the customers. I go the customers. You're the customer.
Because the other thing, like she was saying, that you say opening statement when they are that whole training process that they have, they say opening statement. She says, look, that's again come out of the court system. So we say orientation. So I'm just thinking that terminology also it's important.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that. That court I just believe in free, prior and informed consent, and I talk like that. I'll just go, look, it's really important that you know what I'm doing here. And so that's, I am me. I don't go thinking of courts. I'm just an advocate for, I really want you to know, I'm batting for you both, but under my process. I'm the boss of the process, only so that they know that, you know, that when there's some orders called, such as you can't talk like that, I won't allow the swearing, or, you know, that's not helpful. But being firm with people is recognised that I own the process, and I definitely do. They'll get to own the process when they're talking, and it's almost like they don't need me anymore because they're talking and they're doing and they're going, oh, I've got an idea, blah, blah, blah. You see that brick wall fall down. It hasn't happened a lot with me, but I've seen it happen, and it's quite rewarding.
But tell me, I mean, in terms of the legal position, I mean, within the community, if they have a certain, if there is mediation happening there, and the community, they work on a consensus and they've come out with some solution to something, does it have a legal stamp to it? I mean, do the courts accept it? Does the government accept it?
Well, quite frankly, I don't care who accepts it, as long as the parties agree. If the parties are happy, that's it. If they want to sign something, they're the ones who enter into that agreement and sign something. I'm just the facilitating other. I'm not going to be affected by that decision. They're going to be affected by that decision. That's why I do reality checking with them, to make sure it's okay, make sure that they can uphold their agreement in it, and check for, you know, what might happen and what might not happen, and what happens ifs, you know. I think, you know, that's how I see it and frame it with my my customers.
No, I'm just saying that whole, I think, just the fact that they would accept a process where at least what they are doing leads to something which is actually, I mean, goes one step ahead, has legal sanction to it, or have we, in terms of, again, obviously we'll be going back to colonization, but that aspect of course, the laws that came up, and
like court-ordered mediation or something like that, you're sort of leaning that way. You're wanting to know.
No, I'll tell you what happens. Some countries, the fact that what these communities within them agree to has a stamp of legality. So there will be more trust in the process, because yes, what they are doing is accepted. It's not that this is something we do, but it just outside that there is a law which governs it, and that will not accept what we are saying. Then you're back into the court process. You're back into that structure. So are they kept away from that structure?
Look, there's little one can do if they want to make a legal binding agreement, and that's totally up to the clients or the customers themselves, because they're the ones who are deciding what they need to address and what they're agreeing to and how they're agreeing to it, and the conditions under which that agreement will exist. The main point is, if it falls before the court, well, that's their problem, because I'm not part of the court process. I'm not fielding executions of orders or getting them stamped by the registrar. I think most of the work I do is very community oriented. I have done a number of community matters that involve children, and I try to work with the parents in a way that helps them meet the objectives that they're setting out to deal with, but also ensuring that they understand the ramifications for breaching some of their orders because they're under the protection of children's services, for instance, and assuring them that I'm available if they have any issues that they need to have resolved or addressed in relation to an order or an agreement they've made, because they're Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory. You live in a remote community here. Your problem solvers in the community are the police first, courts next, jails next, family and children's services next. So this list of people who can take them away, lock them up, fine them, none of them are socially oriented for the well-being of that group you've just been working for, other than make sure the law is obeyed.
I think this is
we
what
need to take. That's why I'm saying I'm encouraging communities to lean more into peace building and dispute resolution first. Get those skills up and running. Do that. Get rid of the police stations. Get rid of that, because it's taking children away. It's taking the men away. It's taking the young boys away, and the women are left there holding the can. They're stuck with everything, and that's a pretty rough existence to have in your life. Living without your children or your family.
Yeah, my only thing is that I think we have Sharon here. Sharon, is that correctly pronounced? Sharon, you want to come in? You want to put your video on? Because she was watching on LinkedIn, but there was I think it was the whole signal or something in LinkedIn didn't work properly. So yeah.
Hello. It's been very interesting listening to you, Helen. I found it really, really intriguing. I actually was brought up in Darwin, and my dad actually was the Aboriginal legal aid lawyer for a long time. So lots of insights.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see a fellow Australian.
Okay, you don't like to see us Indians, is it?
Oh no, don't take it that way. I didn't expect to see any Australians.
Look, Ipe. I mean, I got in touch with Ipe. Was also someone who works with you.
Oh, Ipe, yes.
So he's of course coming in next week. But I told him he can come and join your session. There's someone who works with him. What was his name?
Yeah.
Who works? I told him. Yeah, I told him also to come in.
Work together. Yeah. And we work in communities because it almost makes me cry that the attorney generals know that dispute resolution and peace building is a central feature that could support communities with real jobs, real training to help their communities manage conflict in a really constructive way, but also to uphold community well-being and community safety. What in your right mind, why would you want those things? The cost effects, a cost benefits analysis that would be just enormous. Really.
No, but I think sure.
Isn't it? That's half the battle.
But the health of a community is also a cost, isn't it? When you think about it, if the health of the community is good, the costs go down. If you're not jailing someone, the costs go down. Like, hello. Peace building and dispute resolution methods, they're the way to support our people.
It's a no-brainer.
It is. It's a no-brainer.
But Helen, we always will go back to the whole thing of the colonizer's mindset. That does the colonizer want you to sit together and resolve disputes? Because finally, it is the divide and rule policy that the colonizer always had. So Abhi, that's why I was saying that whether you are going to have
You said you didn't want me talking
I
about
know, I knew it would come down to this because you spoke about all those layers, the police. First of all, the police. I'll give you an example. I'm telling you, I had like last year's symposium, we had James Wangarere from Kenya. He spoke about in a community there was a murder. The communities between themselves, they settled it. The victim's family was getting some 15 camels done. Police came in. Police obviously wanted to they filed a report under the penal code. It went into court. The judge understood there's no complainant, there's no witness, what's happening here. So it sends the police back to the community to understand what they settled it and passed an order on that basis. So obviously controversy on that. How can you do this? We have a penal code and everything. So he found support in the constitution. And today, Kenya has, of course, developed that a lot more. And they're looking at giving those communities that kind of autonomy. So that's what I was trying to get at in terms of Australia, because when you talk about all those layers, we on one end will keep talking about mediation within the community.
Oh.
On the other end, that all those layers will exist. So how do we give that community the feeling that they actually are doing a process which leads to something?
Look, we try, like you can ask Ibo this next week if you wish. But the point is that we can only send as many messages as we can because we understand what we're doing. We understand what's happening on the ground, what communities are starving for. And this careless indifference must stop. And I'm the person who's going to make sure it does, because I'm just going to get louder and louder and more assertive about it and start doing some shaming, public shaming, not public flogging, public shaming, because it is not humane. To deny people that opportunity.
Look, I'll tell you where, Helen, where I'm coming from now is the fact that, again, the colonizers' jail, first of all. We keep talking about the criminal justice system. No innocent person should be convicted. Maybe hundreds of guilty people can go free, kind of thing. That's the kind of structure. But I'm saying the fact that you have a jail, an innocent person is in jail up till they're not convicted, they're still innocent. We can still put them in jail. And in some countries that can be for 10 years up till the whole thing gets decided, maybe 20 years also. So, I mean, we had a case here where someone was put on the death penalty by the trial court. And finally, after 14 years, the Supreme Court overturned it. You kept a person in jail for that long. So, I mean, the criminal justice system has to be looked at.
Yes, it certainly does. I mean, look at Julian Assange. He's in jail. He hasn't been convicted of a thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that the colonizer to be able to put you in a jail when you are innocent, because if you already decided that the person is guilty, then what is the whole process for? So we have to, of course, question that. Yeah, we have to question the whole thing there, because that by itself, like I'm saying, again, we'll looking into colonization. I should have just merged the two symposia. It is always going to overlap.
Your own rule.
No, I will have to go there. But before that, like Sharon, do you want to tell us about yourself, and you can please come in with your thoughts. What do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes.
Oh, well, so I was just about to say before, I did grow up in Darwin, but I am Indian.
Yes.
Culturally. So my yeah. So I actually worked in-house at a big bank for a long time, and then chose to take up mediation after I sort of did a lot of farm debt sort of stuff. So I sort of got that sort of farm debt mediation, which I think works wonderfully. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do in, particularly for our Indigenous people. And I'm so interested, Helen, in what you want to do in terms of being loud, because I'm happy to stand by you and champion that. So,
thank you.
Before that,
we need people to amplify these.
Absolutely.
No, but before that, Sharon has to answer a question. Are you a fellow Australian of Helen, or are you a fellow Indian of Vikram? We have to. She said. Let's put her on the spot. There.
I'm a fellow human.
Yes, that's the one we had to listen to, Helen. Then you said fellow Australian. That's where the difference lies.
That's exactly right. But I could hear you as soon as you spoke, as soon as you opened your mouth, I could hear the Australian accent.
Well, Helen, then what are we doing about what steps to be taken so that
Well,
mediation?
I can say that was it this year or last year? I'm just thinking now. I think it might have been last year. We had a national mediation conference, and it was really nuanced with Indigenous methodologies and talking about process and resources and what we need. We did all of that. And at the end, the elders for that for Alice Springs, who hosted the National Mediation Conference, they said that they were asked to write a letter, and so I became the writer, and we crafted this letter saying that we wanted the Federal Attorney General to invoke the rights of Indigenous people in Australia, because it's not invoked yet. It's not been enshrined in law. And inside that, there's all these other beautiful articles that support access to dispute resolution. You know, where's that in Large Manu? Where's that in Central Australia? They don't have that. That communities have access to these sorts of systems of working through disputes or managing conflict in a constructive fashion. Anyway, we wrote this letter, never got an answer, but I'm just going to keep doing it. I've been doing it for the last 20 years, just nagging government. They'd have a good sized book there of all my letters to them. Some of them are pretty nasty too. But I might have to get a bit more, fluid in my language. Do a few swear words.
No, but I think we'll find support on what you're doing from various parts of the world, and some places they have been successful. So I think but this is a mindset situation, like the colonizers' mindset, to change that, to condition them, because the whole aspect of dispute resolution happens in courts. That whole conditioning of the mind over hundreds of years.
Yes, that's exactly what my argument is too. It truly is. I've been saying that for a while as well. And what we've got to do is start examining penalties and sentences, because the colonial paternity. That's what it looks like. It's come straight out of the legal frameworks.
Because I think the other part is that because mediation also got connected with the courts, for me that's the worst thing that could happen, because you go into a mediation telling the let's call them parties because they've come from the court system. You're telling them settle, otherwise it will take so long and these will be the costs. For me, that's not mediation. Mediation is when people sit together, they want to resolve it, they want to collaborate, they will understand each other, the humanistic approach, the values-based concept in it, that got lost. And that is why this symposium, to try to connect to that in Indigenous peoples, because that might be a more purer form of mediation where the community is there. But I'm just looking at it, and I mean, of course, last symposium and everything, are we now required to first build communities? Have communities broken up to the extent that because there is no ownership to communities, so you are not looking at it from that collaborative perspective? I mean, that's another thought that you people will, of course, maybe comment on. But Helen's battery is going flat. What is the plan? What is the plan? Are you going to connect it to something or what?
Well, I can, but it's going to take me a little while. I can connect it to something, but I'll put you on.
Sharon will tell us up till then her experience with mediation and how she's looking at whatever we discussed up till now. Yeah, Sharon, please.
Well, I think my take on it, and I'm relatively new at mediation, so I've only been doing it as a mediator for about 18 months, but I think it's horses for courses. I think it depends on the people present. I don't think it's a one shoe fits all type process. So if you've got two you know, big companies, it's a different way of approaching the mediation. If you've got an abuse case, it's a different methodology. So I think you've actually got to tailor it to the people who are in the room.
I tell you, Sharon,
That's my approach.
No, I tell you why. Because why I'm saying so, I'm not saying it because a theoretical aspect. Practically, I put out one session. I mean, it was just a one episode show. Mediation works. This was a
Yeah.
high value mediation that I was part of as a mediator. And this is a large company in India, and this person is a legal counsel who's had experience with Unilever, and he's been there for years in India. And then he experienced mediation, and he spoke about how he's become an evangelist for mediation. So in that, he speaks about, of course, okay, Vikram, you brought in the human touch. Where do people talk about that in high value? That's what you would say. That's a different world. That world has been created of mediation through the lawyers, and that's a different mediation which is happening. We can move away from it. It's not something that we need to differentiate the two. When you talk about communities or large companies, high value mediation, commercial mediation, or small community thing, I'm saying everywhere the same basics apply between human beings. Their connection applies uniformly. So that part of it is what I'm trying to build on the other end, because I know this other world in Australia definitely have a much more mature market. Certifications, accreditations, it's gone into that direction. And I'm going to the other extent. I'm saying mediators are not made in 40-hour factories. There is so much more that goes into them. So the first show that I started on YouTube is Evolution of a Mediator. It started with Ken Cloke talking about his life. I said, let's see what a mediator is all about. Like I keep talking about their value system that they were brought up in, what their experiences were, their thought process when they were younger, what they were exposed to, their incidents and circumstances. All that makes them what they are. We are demeaning mediators by saying what people are saying. Come to 40 hours, we'll make you a mediator. I mean, with Helen also, I started with that. Are you going there to make mediators? It's just a direction it has gone into. And I'm saying I want to bring it back. And that's why this is one symposium now. But last year, there was a symposium on mediation in our culture and traditions. We had some 97 speakers from 45 countries in that. So all that is lying on YouTube. But the fact was, let's connect people to the process. And once you connect them to the process, people know everything about mediation. It's that technical word we are trying to throw around, some box we are trying to push and say, it's an industry. On the other end, there is a training industry there. Huge amounts of money there. So everything gets focused there. I mean, again, I always give this example, and you haven't, of course, come into my shows, so I'll have to repeat it. There was a senior mediator from UK, Andrew Miller, in the last symposium. He says the 18,000 certified and accredited mediators in UK, only 500 have work. Can you imagine the size of the industry? 18,000 multiplied by, how much it costs to do those trainings in UK. So I've first been moving away from the word training. I'm saying skill development. The person already has the skill. And I'm going backwards now, something called the World Mediation Circle that I'm putting together. I'm saying, let families, communities identify those people who are already there. Let's bring them into the fold, because the user experience is already there. On the other end, all these training programs, and they go through the process, and finally we'll evaluate you, and then we will certify you. Evaluate you on what? User experience. So we'll go through this mock mediation and we'll evaluate you. I'm saying these people already exist who are giving people the user experience. Bring them into the world. Then mediation will take off, because I'm saying the user experience today, based on the court experience, is I settled because otherwise it would cost me so much. And I was taking a gamble because costs would be put by the court on me, or because it would take so long. I mean, what would you go back and tell people? You actually were not happy with the process because you had to settle because there was a gun on your head. We want people to say nice things about mediation, how relationship, and that's why this high value mediation. Why did I do that? In that short thing, he talks about how his relationship with the other party, how it became so much better. All those things, you have to hear that. I'll send you a link to that. So it's all there. We just are being blinded by some people who have taken over. in terms of mediation, they've taken into a certain direction. We don't have to fall for that trap. It's a trap that I don't think mediation is developing. People are benefiting, some people, and that's a small percentage. There also, it's not a large number of people who are. So we have to, that's why we are moving backwards and going back into, I mean, starting with Indigenous communities to see what they are doing, what they have done over years, and picking up from that, yes. But that also has got lost. That is what Helen will also tell us, how over these hundreds of years of colonization, that has got destroyed. So,
So
Helen,
sorry I took
Interesting.
sorry I took so long. I'm just going to go and get myself a stool. And I'm going to block my video again, and I'll be back shortly.
And I'll continue my
I made a
ranting.
coffee as well.
Yeah, what I say is it has been termed ranting by people. This I'll still continue my ranting.
Continue your rant.
Yes, because why I'm telling you this is because of the fact that you said 18 months. I'm saying it's not 18 months. It's been part of you. There was a seed somewhere. Just the fact that you got into it because there was a seed. The seed will grow or has grown with your experience.
I'm passionate about it. Yeah, I've got the passion.
It's part of you. It's part of you.
Yeah.
It's been there.
No,
it's been there.
correct.
And it's been part of your life. Even when you were working and wherever you were working,
Yep.
you brought in that mindset there. I keep talking about the mediator mindset. People might talk about mediators being those who we have certified. No, that's you keep doing that. The mediator mindset is what we need, and that you will carry everywhere. So one is mediation. The other is the role of mediators. There is so much there to be done. I mean, when we talk about even, of course, restorative justice, we're talking about, that's not mediation. That's a role of mediators to get that conversation. So a role.
Sure.
And as you go along, you will see that the role will come in in terms of whatever, of course, consensus building in all kinds of social problems, global problems. So we're working, I'm trying to put that into place. That is a much larger role that, and Ken Cloke has written about it. If you'll find that on my website, is on global role of mediators in social problem solving, global problem solving. But I was telling him also, we reach that stage when mediators can practice full time as mediators. The problem is the way the mediation world has come out, people don't have work as mediators. So they have to do other things. And imagine the frustration. You have that seed in you, you want to do it, you have the mindset, but you have to do other things only because this has not developed. Even in countries like Australia, where it's been for so many years, here we are still going through this whole court process. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues, but my rants will continue, Sharon. So I have to stop.
I'll stay tuned. But sorry, Vikram, I'm going to have to jump off shortly because I've got another call to take. But look, I will connect with both you and Helen, and I'm really interested to keep progressing our discussions.
And what you do is you have the I don't know whether you found the link to the schedule. So
yes, I did. Yes.
So that tells you, and of course, that'll keep getting updated as more people come in. So just land up. You've got the Zoom link now. You can come into the Zoom session. The Zoom link remains the same for all of them.
Oh, okay.
Just drop in and be part of the discussion. I will. The whole idea is to open up the discussion. I mean,
absolutely. No, I'm really grateful for that. So, sorry, Helen, I'm going to have to jump off. I was just saying to Vikram. So really lovely to have met you, and I'll connect with you as well.
Yes, okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. It was nice to meet you too.
Lovely to meet you. Pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for coming, Sharon. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Okay, Vikram.
Yes.
So yes. So
basically, finally, Helen, it all comes down to how we can move away from the whole structure of the colonizer, and how we can develop mediation on the other end, which I was just telling. I don't know whether you heard what I was telling, Sharon, because that's the focus.
Yes, I was listening. That's why I left my the sound on so I could hear everything. I just didn't want you seeing my wandering around and making my coffee and having a vape.
Oh, that's also. So all that you heard, what I was saying, what are your comments on that? Because you'll hear this a lot from me.
I really agree. Look, I'm agreeing from that court annexed type of approach. Although I don't disagree with that approach, but working with countrymen, as my lingo says, is about First Nations people. Working with my countrymen, I know they've got a ceremony that has been thousands and thousands of years old, and that ceremony worked because they're still here.
Yeah,
that's what I actually want to be able to work with my countrymen on, talking about that and not having shame in doing it. Because there is one ceremony I'm very conscious of that is well recorded and documented. They've even got videos of it, and it's called the Nathagura fire ceremony. But it's meant to make everything really chaotic on purpose so that when it's finished, you are relieved that your own rules, your social rules are back in place, and that you appreciate them, and that you work to keep your healthy relationships operational. Now that's a ceremony.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's peace building.
But
isn't it? It
yeah,
is,
exactly.
isn't it? I'm not.
That's what I'm saying. Because what I'm trying to put together is the fact that all that is pure mediation, and they are told that what you do is something which is totally different, and come to this side. This is where mediation happens. This is the box of mediation that we are pushing, and this is only then are you a mediator when you, like you heard me saying that about these 40-hour factories and all that. So that's on the other end. If you tell people, look, a lot of things that they don't want to discuss in terms of their ceremonies and everything is because over the hundreds of years they've made to believe that they don't know what to do. So why that's
or made to believe that their practices are inferior.
Yes, exactly.
And they are super duper. I just fell in love with this ceremony because I saw how thoughtful it truly is. It put people in the box seat of this is what it looks like when you don't solve your problems.
Absolutely.
This is what it looks like when you have horrible, destructive relationships. Now, they're doing it all the time across communities, these horrible relationships, because no one's orchestrating the ceremony. No one's saying, all right, now the ceremony is finished and now you can let go and return to your families and conduct a normal life.
Because I think the important part is that when you have to live as a community, it's basically starts from there. So that's what I was saying, Helen. Is it that maybe we have to move backwards and actually create communities? Because I feel that a lot of the mediation which goes around doesn't consider that aspect, that one aspect which I keep saying, social pressure, to be able to resolve something because of social pressure. And maybe let's call it culture. I would like to put it to culture. I say some people feel social pressure is not a good thing and you should not be looking at that. I said, what is wrong with social pressure? If you want to be a part of a community and you agree to something because of keeping the community together or being part of community, what's wrong with that? So that part of it has been put as something which is not good. It has to be individual, that individualistic aspect of that individualistic society which has been pushed around. I think that also needs to be questioned. There is a collective aspect. The resolution also has to take that into account, and that is why all these ceremonies, or just the fact that a community exists together, I think that's important. I think that also will have to strengthen.
Well, it strengthens the human what do they call it? Epistemology. They share together, because it's only indicative of that particular group that does that particular ceremony. And that particular ceremony is meant to only impact their group, not anybody else's, just their group. And that is like, how clever is that? How clever is that? And to think that the colonisers, when they arrived here, thought all Aboriginal people were brutes, savages and unintellectual. It's super intellectual. It is a social superstructure. So, yeah. Anyway, look, I'm going to have to go because my
Yeah.
sister's going to be home any minute and she's going to say, have you used up all my internet time? But it was really lovely to talk with you, Vikram, and we will meet again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Helen, for doing this. Please drop in for any of the
you.
sessions and looking forward to it. Pleasure speaking to you. There's so much that you have to tell us and bring together and change the world. That's what you need to do.
Yes. Yes, I have a plan for that.
Great. That's what we need to hear now.
Yes. Okay.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.